The silence woke Maggie Wilkins before her alarm ever had the chance. For 6 straight months, Max had been her reliable morning companion, his soft whine arriving like clockwork at 5:30 a.m., followed by the cool nudge of his wet nose against her forearm. It was a routine as predictable as the sunrise, and somehow more sacred. But today, the absence of that nudge, the stillness, was the first sign that something had gone terribly wrong. Maggie blinked into the darkness of her bedroom, her fingers reaching clumsily across the nightstand for her glasses. Her arthritic joints protested the movement, but she pushed through it, her gut already twisting. "Max," she whispered, voice hoarse with sleep and concern. Nothing. No rustling, no whine, no presence. The quiet was too complete, too final. She sat up in bed, the aches in her 68-year-old body flaring up in familiar protest. Her knees twinged as they always did, her back reminding her that the years hadn't passed gently. But today, those pains were secondary. Her mind was already sprinting ahead, connecting dots faster than her body could move. If Max wasn't at her bedside, if he wasn't alert and pacing and ready, that could only mean one thing. Something had happened to Lily. Her bare feet hit the hardwood floor with a soft thump, the cold of early autumn cutting through her soles. The chill was sharp, almost shocking, but not enough to dull the growing dread inside her. She hurried into the hallway, passing the familiar line of family photos hung with loving precision. Robert, her late husband, in his Sunday suit, Jessica, their daughter, in her nursing cap. Maggie had always drawn strength from those frozen smiles, but now they seemed to mock her, snapshots of a life that no longer existed. Robert was gone. Jessica was gone. Only Lily remained. And now Max, her silent guardian, was also missing. The nursery door was ajar. That, more than anything, stopped her cold. Maggie always closed Lily's door all the way, one of those rituals that had become instinctive since taking custody of her granddaughter. The cracked door now gaped like a wound. She pushed it open with trembling fingers, the hinges releasing a long, painful creak that cut through the silence like a scream. Then she saw it. A smear of blood on the pale blue carpet, no larger than a handprint but unmistakable. Her nurse's training kicked in without thought, her eyes scanning, evaluating. Not pooling, not arterial, maybe 8 hours old. Not a fatal bleed, but enough to tell a story, enough to terrify. She followed the trail with her eyes. It led under the crib. Her legs moved before she could think, shuffling toward the hand-carved crib her husband had made for Jessica 3 decades ago. The same crib where Lily had slept each night since the day Maggie brought her home from the hospital, the day Jessica died giving her life. The crib was empty. Gone was the yellow blanket with the embroidered daisies. Gone was the stuffed lamb that Lily refused to sleep without. Gone was Lily. Maggie's heart stuttered in her chest, her body folding as if the oxygen had been sucked from the room. The baby monitor lay shattered on the floor. Its red light, her link to the sleeping child, was dark. "Lily," she gasped. "Lily!" Her cry echoed into the stillness, but there was no reply. Then came a sound, a soft, wounded whimper from behind the rocking chair. She turned, hope flaring, but it wasn't Lily. It was Max. He lay curled tightly in a ball, the protective stance of a dog who had fought and lost. His breathing was shallow, laboured. A patch of fur on his neck was slick with something wet and dark. He tried to rise when he saw her, nails scraping weakly against the hardwood, but his legs gave out underneath him. "Oh God, Max," Maggie whispered, collapsing to her knees beside him. Her hands moved without thought, checking his pulse, too fast. His breathing, shallow, the wound at his neck, a small puncture. Something had been injected. Her medical instincts recoiled. This wasn't a bite. This was deliberate, a sedative or worse. Tears blurred her vision. "Stay with me, boy," she whispered. "Stay with me." Max whined again, trying to drag himself toward the window. "No, don't move," she said, cradling his head as though she could shield him from the pain. "We'll find her. We'll find Lily." That's when she saw the note. Folded, tucked under the windowsill, held down by a single tiny object, a pink baby sock. Her fingers shook as she pulled the paper free and unfolded it. 24 hours to bring what's mine, or you'll never see her again. "No police. You know what I want. The old man knows where to find me." The room spun. She clutched the rocking chair to steady herself, the same chair where she had once fed Jessica as an infant, the same one she used to soothe Lily each night. She could still feel their tiny bodies in her arms. The phone rang. A piercing sound that seemed to come from another universe. She stumbled toward the wall-mounted extension, grabbing it with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. "Hello? Miss Wilkins?" A calm, professional woman. "This is Dr. Bennett from Riverdale Veterinary. I'm calling because a man dropped off your dog's blood work results." "Someone took my granddaughter," Maggie interrupted, her voice cracking. "And Max, he's hurt. He's been injected." The vet's breath caught. "You need to bring Max in immediately. From the blood sample, I believe he was injected with a neurotoxin. It's highly dangerous to dogs. It attacks the nervous system progressively." "Will he?" Maggie couldn't finish. "If you get him treatment within 24 hours, there's a chance," Dr. Bennett said gently. "After that," her voice faded. The silence filled in the blanks. Maggie looked down at Max. He was trying to crawl toward the window again, trailing saliva and blood, trying to work, to protect, to serve, despite everything. She knelt and touched her forehead to his. "We'll find her," she whispered. "I need you alive to help me." She reached for the phone again. "Frank," she said when the call connected. "It's Maggie. Someone's taken Lily, and they're killing Max. I need you, now." The clock on the nursery wall ticked. 23 hours and 59 minutes remaining. Maggie barely remembered hanging up the phone. Years of experience in emergency rooms took over. Assess, prioritize, act. With surprising strength, she slid her arms beneath Max's limp frame. He weighed less than he should, 85 pounds of muscle reduced by trauma and toxin. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes met hers for one fleeting moment, and that was all she needed. "Easy, boy," she whispered, maneuvering him through the narrow hallway. Each step a negotiation with pain, hers and his. Outside, the Georgia morning held the stillness that comes before heat settles in. Dew clung to overgrown grass that Robert would have never allowed to grow this wild. Their Victorian farmhouse, always a symbol of peace, now looked haunted in the early light. The yellow roses along the trellis glowed faintly gold, oblivious to the terror unfolding inside. With considerable effort, she lifted Max into the back seat of her old Buick. He let out a soft groan as his limbs settled awkwardly against the seat cushions. Even then, he turned his head, searching for something. Lily, Maggie realized. Even now, his thoughts were on the baby. "We'll find her," she promised, closing the door gently. "But first, I need you breathing." As she backed down the gravel driveway, a battered Ford pickup swung into her path, its tires spraying loose rock in every direction. Frank Thornton jumped out before it had fully stopped. He was a wiry 73 with sun-damaged skin and the gait of a man who'd never retired in spirit. Decades in law enforcement had chiseled him into someone who moved with intention. His face, usually composed, was tight with worry. "Show me," he said. Nothing else. Maggie led him back into the house. Inside the nursery, the silence felt even louder. The blood smear on the rug, the smashed monitor, the empty crib. Frank knelt beside the stain, dipped a finger into it and brought it to his nose. "Not Lily's," he murmured. "Too dark, too dry. This is Max's." He stood and surveyed the room, his eyes missing nothing. Forced entry, through the window, professional job, see the scratches on the lock, at least 2 people. One handled the dog, the other took the baby. Maggie stood stiffly near the crib. They injected him. The vet said neurotoxin. He's got 24 hours. Frank turned to her. "That's not random. That's a message." She handed him the ransom note with fingers that trembled only slightly now. He read it quickly, jaw tightening. "The old man knows where to find me." "That's directed at me," he said flatly. "Why?" Maggie asked, voice rising. "Why would someone take Lily and hurt Max? What is going on?" Frank hesitated, then finally said, "I need more information before I can say for sure. But yes, I have a suspicion." "We don't have time for suspicions," Maggie snapped. "Tell me what you know." He sighed and looked around the nursery. "Let's get Max to the vet first. We'll talk in the car." They made the drive in near silence, the old Buick rocking slightly as Frank took the back roads to avoid construction. In the rearview mirror, Maggie watched Max, his head resting on her lap. His fur was matted, still wet with blood. She stroked the scar that ran across his muzzle, a white slash against black and tan, remembering the day she met him. It had been just 3 months after Jessica died. Maggie wasn't looking for a dog. just trying to donate old blankets to the local shelter. But something had pulled her to the back kennels. There, cowering in a corner, was a German shepherd whose eyes mirrored her grief. "What's his story?" she asked. "Found tied to a tree off I-85, badly abused. Doesn't let anyone near him, scheduled for euthanasia tomorrow." Something inside Maggie had shifted. "I'll take him," she said, surprising herself. The shelter staff had called her crazy, a woman her age with arthritis and an infant, taking in a traumatized shepherd. But Maggie had seen too many people give up on the broken. She wouldn't do the same. It took Max weeks to trust her, months before he stopped flinching at shadows. But from the first moment he saw Lily, he'd been different. He'd crept to her crib, sniffed gently, and settled beneath it like a soldier finding his post. By the end of the second month he could retrieve diapers, fetch bottles, even nudge Maggie awake before Lily began to cry. Neighbours called it miraculous. Maggie called it healing. Now in the back seat she felt his body shudder under her hand. "We're almost there," she murmured. "Just hold on." The veterinary clinic came into view. White brick, blue shutters, a swing set in the side yard. Peaceful, ordinary, nothing to suggest that a life-or-death battle would be fought inside. Dr. Emily Bennett met them at the entrance, young, sharp-eyed, serious. "Bring him in," she ordered. Frank and Maggie carried Max inside. The exam was quick, clinical. Bennett's expression turned graver with each second. "It's a modified neurotoxin," she explained. "Something I've only seen referenced in military veterinary studies, not commercially available. Slow release, but deadly. I've started a counteragent, but..." "But what?" Maggie asked, already knowing. Even with treatment, the damage may be irreversible. Paralysis, death, if he exerts himself. Her voice trailed off. Max whimpered as if understanding. Maggie stepped outside to call the police. She didn't care what the note said. This was her granddaughter. Frank followed, his face shadowed. "Wait," he said. "Before you call, let me explain." "No more waiting," Maggie said, cutting him off. "I buried my husband. Then I buried my daughter. I'm not burying my grandbaby too. So if you know something, Frank, anything, you'd better talk now." Before he could respond, a patrol car pulled up. Officer Ryan Daniels, barely old enough to shave, stepped out. "Mrs. Wilkins, we got a call from your neighbour, said there was a disturbance." Maggie nodded slowly. "Someone took my granddaughter." Daniels looked from her to Max on the table. "The dog didn't alert you?" "Max doesn't bark without reason," she said, voice steel. Daniels glanced at the dog. "Even trained animals miss things, ma'am. Are you sure she didn't just wander off?" Frank stepped forward, voice hard. "She's 14 months old. The crib gate was up. There's blood on the floor. A ransom note." The young officer flushed. "Of course. Sorry. A detective will contact you soon." As he left, Frank sank into a chair. His hands were shaking. "You promised to explain," Maggie said quietly. "Max's training, the note, all of it." Frank looked old then, not just in years, but in weight. "Let me tell you about the first time I saw Max," he said. "But not here. Can the vet keep him for a while?" "I'm not leaving him," Maggie replied. Frank stood, joints cracking. "Then I'll bring coffee, and we'll talk here. But Maggie, this goes back further than you think. 6 months ago wasn't the first time I saw your dog." As he walked away, Maggie looked back through the glass. Max's chest rose shallow and uneven, but it rose. "Hold on, boy," she whispered. "We've still got a fight ahead." Frank returned 20 minutes later with 2 steaming cups of black coffee and a folder tucked under his arm. He handed Maggie a cup and sat heavily in the vinyl chair beside her, the lines in his face seeming deeper than ever. "I should have told you everything back then," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Maybe if I had, Lily would still be safe." Maggie didn't respond. She stared at Max through the glass of the exam room, his chest slowly rising and falling, E4 line taped to his foreleg. She didn't look away when she said, "Start talking." Frank nodded, sipping his coffee before beginning. Max, or Sentinel as he was called back then, was part of a specialized military K9 program. Not for explosives or drugging, more sensitive. He was trained to detect chemical compounds used in covert operations, highly restricted materials. We're talking about stuff even advanced sensors miss. Maggie finally turned to face him. "You said you saw him before. How?" "I was brought in as a consultant about 4 years ago," Frank explained. My experience with the Atlanta PD's K9 unit got me a spot on a joint training exercise. That's when I met him. Sentinel was the star of the program, precise, focused, brilliant. I only saw him once, but I remembered those mismatched eyes. And after the program, funding was cut. The dogs were sold to private contractors. Max, Sentinel, was bought by a security firm, one owned by Theo Hayes. Maggie stiffened. Robert's nephew. Frank nodded grimly. The same. Theo wanted attack dogs, not detection dogs. When Max wouldn't bite on command, his trainers tried to force it out of him. When that didn't work, they punished him. Maggie's stomach turned. She remembered Max's flinches, the scars, his fear of boots. That monster. And now he's taken Lily, Frank said. I believe so. The note, bring what's mine, that's Theo. He's always believed Robert cheated him out of the inheritance. When Robert changed his will, everything went to Jessica. And now to Lily. You're the trustee. He thinks I can sign it over to him. Exactly. Maggie stood abruptly, needing to move. We need to find them. Frank pulled out his phone. Already working on it. I have a friend, former military, still has access to the database the original K9 chips were logged into. If Theo didn't remove Max's chip... A buzz interrupted him. Frank looked at his phone and stood. We've got something. He held out the phone so Maggie could read the text. A tracking log, brief, fragmented, but clear. Max's chip activated when his heart rate spiked last night. Movement registered from your house toward the Whitaker property. Signal cuts off halfway. The Whitaker place? Maggie frowned. That's been abandoned for years. Not entirely, Frank said darkly. There've been rumors, late-night deliveries, no proof, but if Theo's using it... Then we go, Maggie said. Frank hesitated. We need more. A location isn't enough. As he spoke, Maggie's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with trembling fingers. Hello? Silence. Then, crackling through static and tears. Grandma? Lily? Maggie's heart nearly stopped. I want to come home, the little girl whimpered, her voice thick with fear. Where are you, baby? Are you okay? Can you see anything? Before she could get an answer, a male voice took over, cold, measured. Now you know she's alive. For now, bring the deed and transfer papers to the Whitaker property. By midnight. Come alone. No police, no Frank Thornton, or you'll never see her again. The call ended. Maggie stood frozen, the phone still at her ear. They have the same deadline as Max, she whispered. Midnight. Frank didn't waste time. We'll go, but not the front way. There's a trail through the woods, an old hunting route Robert and I used. It'll take us behind the Whitaker property. Maggie nodded. Let's move. They returned to her property, the afternoon sun climbing high above the treetops. But just as they passed the edge of her land, Maggie saw something near the oak tree by the property line. Stop, she said suddenly. There, by the roots. Frank braked hard. They both got out and approached the massive oak. Half buried in grass was a small metal object, glinting in the sun. Frank knelt and picked it up with a handkerchief. Dog tag. Military issue. No name, just a number, and an S, Sentinel. It wasn't there yesterday, Maggie said. We walk this path every evening. He must have dropped it during the struggle, Frank murmured, or left it on purpose. Maggie's voice trembled. You left us a trail? Frank pointed. Blood. Drops in the grass. Leading into the woods. Away from the road. Away from the Whitaker property. He's leading us somewhere else. Maggie realized. Somewhere Theo doesn't want us to find. Frank checked his watch. 16 hours left. They followed the trail. The Georgia woods thickened quickly, the late morning sun filtering in dappled beams. Tracking wasn't easy, blood on leaves, disturbed soil, but Frank was methodical. Every few yards he stopped, crouched, checked a broken twig or a dark spot on a branch. These aren't random, he said. He was trained for this. He's marking the path. Max was too weak to join the search. They'd left him resting in the back of Frank's truck, the air conditioning on, medical bag by his side. Maggie had administered his latest injection just before they left, each dose buying them time, but not certainty. Do you think he brought Lily this way? Maggie asked, her breathing heavy. If he did, they didn't go far, Frank replied. He was wounded. Carrying her. Suddenly, Frank raised a hand. Wait. Through the trees, barely visible, stood a structure, an old hunting cabin. Logs grey with age, roof moss-covered, but the padlock on the door, new, gleaming. This isn't on any map I know, Frank said. Nowhere near the Whitaker place. They crouched behind a fallen tree. No sign of vehicles, no people, but the blood trail led straight to the back door. This must have been the first stop, Maggie said. They took her here first. Then moved her, Frank agreed, which means they left something behind. They approached cautiously. Frank drew his revolver, weathered but cared for. Retired doesn't mean unarmed, he muttered. The back window was broken. Frank cleared the jagged glass with his jacket and reached in to unlock the door. The cabin interior was musty, dim, a single room, table, 2 chairs, wood stove, narrow cot. Maggie's eyes landed instantly on the small pink blanket on the cot, Lily's. She rushed forward, lifting it with shaking hands, pressing it to her face. She was here. Frank examined the table. Papers, property deeds, transfer forms, all ready for you to sign. Theo never planned to give her back, Maggie said, even if I gave him what he wanted. Frank didn't argue. Then on the floor he saw it, another tag. This one newer, not military. Commercial logo, Hayes Security. He turned it over, scratched into the back, in quarry, North Quarry. Maggie's breath caught. The old limestone quarry? It's been abandoned for decades, Frank said. But there's a network of caves, perfect for hiding things. And Theo? Exactly where he doesn't want to be found. Maggie looked at the trail behind them, then at the cabin, at the clue left by a dying dog, fighting to lead them home. Then that's where we're going, she said, to the quarry, before time runs out. The sun had long disappeared behind thick grey clouds by the time Maggie and Frank reached the narrow service road that led toward the North Quarry. The air felt heavy, charged with a storm not yet unleashed. The sky was an ominous slate, thunder rumbling distantly like a warning drumbeat from the earth itself. Frank killed the headlights as they neared the bend. The road curved through a dense copse of trees, then opened onto a wide gravel clearing. There, parked near the old quarry entrance, were 2 black SUVs. Company, Frank muttered. They pulled over into the trees, hidden by undergrowth. From their vantage point, they could see 3 armed men patrolling the perimeter, calm, methodical, practiced. These weren't amateurs. These were men who moved like soldiers. We can't go in through the front, Frank said, but I know another way. An old mining trail cuts through your property and leads to the back cave system. Maggie nodded. Then that's how we go in. Frank eased the truck into reverse, guiding them back down the path and onto a side road that wound toward the forest bordering her land. The trees thickened, closing in above them. Rain began to patter lightly on the windshield, and within moments it was a steady, soaking downpour. George's summer storms didn't knock politely, they crashed through. The radio crackled. A weather advisory, flash flooding likely in low-lying areas, rainfall projected at 4 to 6 inches within the next 3 hours. The quarry will flood, Frank said grimly. Those caves will start filling fast. Maggie's thoughts raced. If Theo had taken Lily into those caves, the storm wasn't just a threat, it was a death sentence. From the back seat, Max whimpered. Maggie turned to find him lifting his head weakly. His cloudy eyes, though dulled by pain, were focused, intensely, on the direction of the quarry. He tried to rise, only to collapse again, his breath catching. "I know," she whispered, reaching back to stroke his soaked fur. "We're going." The road soon became impassable. A fallen oak blocked the path entirely. "We'll have to go on foot from here," Frank said, already opening his door. Maggie hesitated, looking at Max. "He can't walk that far." "I'll carry him," Frank said without missing a beat. "I've got one more haul in me." They moved quickly, Maggie shouldering a small backpack with the vet's mobile kit, Lily's blanket, a flashlight. Frank lifted Max with a grunt, the shepherd going limp over his shoulders. The rain soaked through them in seconds, the forest ahead turning into a blur of branches and shadows. 1/2 mile in, visibility dropped to near zero. The storm clawed at the trees, tearing loose branches and lashing leaves into their faces. Maggie's legs burned, but she kept moving, driven by something deeper than pain or exhaustion, love. "We're almost there," Frank called back, his voice hoarse. They reached the cave entrance just as the worst of the storm hit. Hidden beneath a ridge, the old mine's wooden supports had rotted, but the entryway remained open. A rusted sign warned trespassers, but neither of them even glanced at it. Frank lowered Max to the ground. The dog lay still for a moment, then, impossibly, staggered to his feet. He turned toward the cave entrance, swaying, his head lifted like a compass drawn to magnetic north. "He knows," Frank said in awe. "He's been here. Maybe last night." Maggie turned on the flashlight, its narrow beam barely cut through the murky darkness. They stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and mildew. Water dripped steadily from above, and the floor squelched beneath their boots. They moved slowly, carefully. Max led, his body trembling with every step, but still he moved forward. The tunnel split. Without hesitation, Max turned right. "He's tracking," Frank whispered. "Scent, memory, something." They passed rusted mining carts, shattered wooden crates, old boot prints half-preserved in the dirt. The further they went, the louder the water became. Not drips now, but a steady, urgent rush. Suddenly the passage opened into a wide chamber, and below them, lit by industrial floodlights powered by a growling generator, was the operation. Tables stacked with lab equipment, boxes sealed and labelled, 5 armed men. And in the centre of it all, standing beside a black SUV, was Theo Hayes. In his arms, wrapped in a familiar pink pyjama set, was Lily. Maggie gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "She's alive," Frank breathed. "God help us, she's alive." Below, the scene was tense. The storm had begun to flood the lower levels of the quarry. Water poured in through wide cracks in the stone, ankle deep and rising. The men were moving faster now, packing equipment, preparing to flee. "They're evacuating," Frank said. "This is our shot." A burst of static cut through the quiet, a voice over a radio nearby. "Perimeter secure. No sign of the old lady or Thornton." Frank's expression darkened. They knew we were coming. Maggie looked at Max. The chip, if they were monitoring it. Frank's jaw tightened. Could have been a trap all along. But then Max moved. With no warning, the shepherd stepped to the edge of the ledge and began descending the jagged incline toward the quarry floor. "Max!" "No," Maggie whispered, reaching for him, but he was already gone. Step by agonizing step, he made his way down. "What is he doing?" she cried. "Creating a distraction," Frank answered, "and he knows exactly what he's doing." Below, one of the guards shouted, "Dog!" Theo spun around, his face going pale. "That's impossible." Max reached the floor, his legs shaking, his body soaked, blood still dripping from his side. But his posture was pure defiance. He growled, low and primal, a sound forged in survival and fury. "Shoot it!" Theo snapped. "No!" Lily screamed. "Max!" Her little voice cracked through the chaos like lightning. She squirmed in Theo's arms, reaching. That was the moment Max launched. His body moved faster than it should have been capable of, hurling itself into the nearest guard. They both went down in a crash. Frank fired 2 shots into the ceiling, the echo thunderous. "Go!" he yelled. Maggie didn't hesitate. She scrambled down the slope, her knees screaming, her heart thundering. Theo turned toward the SUV, fumbling for the door with one arm while restraining Lily with the other. She reached the cavern floor just as another guard raised his rifle toward Max. Maggie tackled him. The rifle clattered across the stone and she kicked it away. Frank was right behind her, revolver raised. He fired again. 2 more shots, this time aimed true. The last thing Maggie saw before the cavern plunged into chaos was Max, limping, dragging himself through rising water toward the SUV where Lily was crying her name. His tail beat once, weak but full of intent. She sprinted forward. Theo reached for his gun. And then Max struck again. Maggie didn't stop to watch the fight. She yanked the SUV door open, pulled Lily into her arms. "Max!" Lily sobbed, reaching over Maggie's shoulder. Then a gunshot rang out, one last thunderous crack that silenced the chaos. Frank stood, his revolver smoking. Theo Hayes collapsed into the water. Maggie didn't breathe until she reached Max. He was still. His body floated just beneath the waterline, blood curling in tendrils around him. "Max," she cried, dropping to her knees beside him. "No, not now. Stay with me." His eyes fluttered open. Lily reached down and touched his muzzle. His tail moved just once, but it was enough. Maggie didn't pause to process the chaos left behind. She clutched Lily tight against her chest, feeling the girl's small arms wrap desperately around her neck, and turned her focus entirely to Max. His body lay half submerged in the rising quarry water, his breathing faint and uneven, his eyes barely open. Blood mixed with rainwater in spiraling crimson ribbons that ran down the curve of his flank and into the flood. Frank waded toward them, revolver still in hand, eyes scanning the shadows for any remaining threat. "Theo's down," he confirmed breathlessly. "But we have to move. This place is flooding fast." "He's not going to make it unless we get him treatment," Maggie said, struggling to lift Max. "Help me." Frank holstered his weapon and joined her, kneeling in the frigid water as they heaved Max's limp body between them. The dog gave a low whine as he was lifted, legs twitching reflexively but offering no real resistance. Lily buried her face into Maggie's shoulder, trembling, tears mixing with the rain. "Max is hurt," she whispered. "Fix him, Grandma, like when I get my boo-boos." "I'm trying, sweet pea," Maggie murmured, her throat tightening. They moved together, half carrying, half dragging Max toward the quarry entrance. Outside, the storm had reached a new level of fury. Rain lashed sideways across their faces, and thunder boomed so loudly it felt like the earth itself was cracking open. The forest path they'd taken was now a river of mud and branches, littered with debris and gushing with runoff. Frank glanced at his watch, then at the sky. "We'll never get the truck through this. We need another route." Maggie thought fast, her brain recalibrating as it had so many times in the ER. "Jameson's place," she said, "just over the ridge, 1/2 mile. He has a satellite phone, emergency gear, and he used to be a combat medic." Frank didn't hesitate. "Let's go." With Max draped across his shoulders once more, Frank led the way through the drenched woods. Maggie followed close behind, Lily wrapped in her arms, her own strength rapidly draining but her will uncompromised. The 1/2-mile trek felt like hours. Maggie's legs trembled with each step, her joints screaming, the weight of Lily pulling at her spine. Every few paces she stumbled, but Frank was always ahead, unwavering, Max's body limp but cradled as gently as a wounded soldier. Finally, through the storm and trees, the lights of Jameson's stables emerged, warm, steady, promising salvation. Maggie nearly sobbed with relief. As they reached the stable doors, a figure emerged into the downpour, Keith Jameson himself, wide-shouldered and soaked through but instantly alert. "Who the hell, Frank?" he called. "What in God's name?" "No time," Frank snapped. "We need your help. Dog's dying. Kid was kidnapped. It's a whole mess." Jameson didn't ask another question. He opened the stable door wider and motioned them in. Inside, the warmth was immediate. A pot-bellied stove in the corner glowed red, casting dancing shadows across the wooden walls. The scent of hay, leather, and damp fur filled the space. Frank lowered Max gently onto a stack of horse blankets near the heat. Maggie dropped to her knees beside him, cradling his head with shaking hands. Jameson knelt next to her, examining Max quickly with a medic's practiced eye. Stab wounds, major blood loss, pupils uneven, neurosymptoms. What was he injected with? "Military-grade neurotoxin," Frank said, dog-specific. "He's been under treatment, but we're running out of time." Jameson's eyes sharpened. "I've heard of it. Never seen it in the field. But I've got something that might help." He rose and crossed to a locked cabinet, pulling out a heavy-duty medical kit. Maggie retrieved the portable veterinary kit from her backpack and handed it over. "This is from Dr. Rowe. Bennett," she said. "Doses every 2 hours. We're about 30 minutes late." Jameson scanned the contents. "It's close to what I'd use. Might be enough. But the blood loss." Lily, who had curled up quietly beside Max, suddenly looked up. "Is Max going to heaven?" The question hit Maggie like a blade. Her voice caught. "Not if we can help it." "You're fibbing," Lily said softly. "Your eyes get crinkly when you fib." Maggie looked down at her granddaughter's earnest little face and felt the weight of every impossible decision, every ounce of fear settle into her bones. "Do what you have to do," she told Jameson. "Whatever it takes. He deserves the chance." Jameson nodded. "But you need to understand, this treatment might save his life, but it won't save everything. He may never walk right again. He may go blind. Neurological damage could be permanent." Maggie didn't flinch. "Do it." Frank moved to help, bracing Max as Jameson prepared the injections. The treatment was intense. Max convulsed almost immediately, his powerful muscles twitching violently under the blankets. Jameson held him down as Maggie tried to shield Lily from the sight. "It's okay, sweet pea," she murmured, rocking her gently. "He's just fighting. That's what brave boys do." The spasms subsided slowly. Max's breathing slowed to a crawl. Then it stopped. Maggie was at his side in an instant. "No, no, no." Jameson launched into chest compressions. "Frank, bag valve red kit, now!" Maggie watched in frozen horror as they worked on him, counting out compressions, exchanging silent glances that told her everything she didn't want to hear. "Max," Lily cried suddenly, voice clear, strong. "Come!" It wasn't a plea, it was a command. A child's simple belief that the world would bend to her need, and something did. Max shuddered once, then again. Then his chest rose, shallow, shaky, but unmistakably alive. Jameson froze, hands still pressed to Max's ribs. "He's back!" he whispered, astonished. "I don't believe it, but he's back." Maggie wept silently, holding Lily and pressing her forehead to Max's neck. His heartbeat was faint beneath her fingers, but it was there. They'd bought him more time. Enough to hope. Hours later, after Max had been stabilized as best as field medicine could allow, the three of them sat in exhausted silence near the stove. Lily had finally fallen asleep in Maggie's lap, her breath even and soft. Max dozed beside them, his body wrapped in blankets, an IV drip now hanging from a makeshift hook Jameson had fashioned from an old bridle rack. Every few minutes his ears twitched at sounds in the stable, but he remained still, conserving what strength he had left. Frank poured coffee into chipped mugs. His hand trembled slightly, but his aim was steady. "We were lucky." "No," Maggie said, her voice thick. "We were loved, and we fought like hell to keep it." Jameson looked at Max. Whatever that dog came from, whatever they trained him for, he was always meant to end up here. Maggie nodded slowly. "He's family." And they all sat in silence for a long time, listening to the storm fade into the distance, while Max, the broken, blinded hero, slept, alive for now, because he had chosen to lead them home. Three months later, the Georgia morning unfolded in crisp golden light. The trees had surrendered their leaves to autumn, scattering reds and ochres across the Wilkins property like a carpet of fire and rust. Maggie Wilkins sat on the front porch of her farmhouse, cradling a mug of coffee between her weathered hands, steam curling into the chill air. From her spot in the old rocking chair, Robert's chair, worn smooth by time and memory, she could see the entire front yard. The newly built playground, small but sturdy, stood where the old vegetable beds used to be. Beyond it, a pair of swings creaked gently in the breeze. And near them, in the very centre of it all, lay Max. The German shepherd rested on a thick padded bed, positioned so he could track every sound within the property. His ears twitched with each gust of wind, each squirrel's scurry, each squeal of delight from Lily as she threw herself into a pile of leaves with the abandon only a toddler could manage. Max didn't move much anymore. The neurotoxin and the stab wounds had left him permanently blind in both eyes, and his right hind leg dragged slightly when he walked. But his senses, those miraculous, trained instincts, had adapted. He knew every inch of the land by scent, sound and touch. He no longer needed eyes to see what mattered. Frank Thornton stepped onto the porch, a thermos in hand. "Top you off?" he asked, holding it aloft. Maggie raised her cup. "Doctor says I shouldn't have more than 2 a day." Frank poured anyway, chuckling. "Your doctor also didn't watch you drag a bleeding German shepherd and a baby through a flash flood. You've earned your 3rd cup, Maggie." She gave a soft laugh. "You think we'll ever stop hearing the storm in our sleep?" Frank's expression darkened momentarily, then softened as his gaze drifted to Lily. The child was now attempting to coax Max into playing, waving a stick over his nose like a wand. The dog's tail thumped once in response. "No," Frank said finally, "but I think we'll learn to hear it differently." Silence settled comfortably between them. The mailbox creaked open at the bottom of the driveway as the rural mail carrier slid a package through the slot. Maggie waited until the truck pulled away before rising, moving carefully down the porch steps with the slow deliberation of someone long acquainted with stubborn knees. She returned with a stack of envelopes and one large manila package. She smiled when she saw the return address, the Sentinel Foundation. Back on the porch, she slit open the envelope and pulled out a set of official documents bearing the government seal. 501c3 status is approved, she said aloud, waving the letter for Frank to see. "We're official." Frank grinned. "Well, I'll be. Maggie Wilkins, non-profit founder. Your Robert would have been proud." She nodded slowly. He always believed money only mattered if it helped someone. The Sentinel Foundation had been born out of Max's recovery. During his long healing process, Maggie and Frank had learned just how many former military and police dogs were discarded, abandoned, euthanized, or sold to violent private contractors. With Keith Jameson's expertise, a portion of the Wilkins estate redirected, and support from sympathetic law enforcement, they'd already rescued 12 dogs. Each one had a name, each one had a story, none as dramatic as Max's. But every one of them now had a chance. A delighted shriek interrupted the quiet. Lily had managed to pile a mound of leaves nearly waist-high and was gleefully leaping into it. Max, guided by her voice and the sound of rustling, nudged closer, sniffing cautiously at the edges before stepping in. His tail wagged as he pawed at the leaves, sending a flutter into the air. "Would you look at that?" Frank murmured. "That dog hasn't played since the rescue." Maggie felt her throat tighten. "He's healing," she said softly. "We all are." A sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway, breaking the reverie. Its doors bore the FBI seal. Special Agent Diana Chen stepped out, folder in hand, heels crunching over gravel. "Mrs. Wilkins." "Mr. Thornton, sorry to intrude." "Not at all," Maggie said, rising. Chen smiled, formal but warm. "We have news. Theo Hayes has accepted a plea deal. 25 years, no parole. In exchange, he gave us the entire network. Suppliers, distribution channels, even corrupt officials on payroll. We're rolling up the operation across 3 states. Frank exhaled a long breath. "So it's over?" Chen nodded. "Legally, yes, but there's something else." She opened the folder and held out a medallion. Gold, engraved with the FBI crest and the words Distinguished Civilian Service. "The Bureau would like to officially recognize Max," she said. "It's not common procedure, but his role in breaking this case, tracking, protecting, identifying the quarry location, it was extraordinary. We'd like to present it formally at our Atlanta office, if he's able to travel." Maggie's voice wavered. "He'll be there. We all will." After Chen left, they sat again in silence. Max had settled beside Lily, her small hand resting on his back. He lay still, his head tilted toward the sound of her voice. "He doesn't need eyes to see her," Frank said quietly. "He sees her with his heart." Maggie nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "That's how I see him too." The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the yard. Lily laughed, chasing after them. Max rose to follow, limping, but determined, his ears tuned to every movement. For a long time, Maggie watched them. Her granddaughter, this house, and the dog who had given everything to protect her. Neither whole, but both alive, both healing. And in that quiet moment, Maggie Wilkins realized something she hadn't dared believe since Jessica died. They were going to be okay.